You've been with this for a long, long time.
Yeah, 12 years.
Take me back to the initial spark, because I know Anthony had the idea, but it's the two of you. What was the kind of initial genesis of it, and why Ghostbusters?
Well, Ghostbusters is Anthony's favourite film from childhood, and we'd kind of worked on another documentary, which was a making of behind the scenes, and then the director of that really wasn't the continuing with making of documentaries really wasn't where he saw his future going, and so I was working in front of camera and doing interviewing on the red carpet. Anthony obviously worked behind the scenes, and he just came to me and said, "Look, I really want to do this about Ghostbusters. If I can get John Landis to see whether we could get Dan Aykroyd. Do you fancy kind of marrying our skills and going out and making this definitive documentary, because nobody's done anything with the kind of depth." And I was like, yeah, all right. I have amazing belief in my brother as a filmmaker, and we went on this journey to self-fund a documentary so that we could retain the kind of artistic integrity, really, and be on it to tell an honest story, which I really hope that we've done. I believe we have.
I believe you have as well. But Ghostbusters is one of those movies that's so beloved, but we've always had, so most of the behind-the-scenes stuff has been very quote-unquote in-house. It's about the movie, it's not really going deeper. So there's this great gap for you guys. It must have been great to explore all these facets of both films in the end.
Yeah, absolutely, because what we've done is, as we started to do all the interviews, we were finding this kind of current and repetitive theme about the time constraints that the effects guys were working against. The post-production was cut like 6 months. And so what we found was this human interest story that really kind of needed to be told, and it's kind of like formed the backbone. And like I say, it anchors the story because you invest in these people and this journey that they went on, and the artistry. There's real kind of there's camaraderie, and there's innovation, and when we were talking to everybody, they've all got these most amazing personalities and anecdotes, and Anthony is such a brilliant storyteller, even if I say so myself. And so what he's been able to do is not just kind of regurgitate this kind of generic kind of interviews. It literally is these you get to know these people, and it's very much as if they've got their pictures and thrown them on got them out and thrown them and gone, look, this is when we did this, and this is when, so it's very much a recollection of their memories.
Yeah, and obviously, people would obviously look at documentaries and say, oh, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, but it's the people but we know their stories, quite intrinsically, but below them, Richard Edlund and all those kind of guys. It must have been great to discover things that we may not have ever heard of if it hadn't been for what you've made.
Absolutely, and it was so important to us. And when we first started doing the film, it was paramount to us, really, that we get to speak to people that haven't spoken on camera before. And so, so that we've got lots of people that literally were behind the scenes, and I think people do go to like your Richard Edlunds and your John Brunos, because they kind of were at the helm. But there's so many people that again work together, and the marvellous thing that we'll see again from Boss Film is just how Richard Edlund he had a family, and everybody, he had loyalty, and everybody was just going to work their butts off for him, and they did, and what they've been able to pull off. And remember, it's practical effects. There's no digital enhancements. It didn't exist.
Yeah. You've been on a kind of 10-year odyssey to do this, and in that time, even though it's taken you a long time, you got to speak to people who are sadly no longer with us. That must be as well give it a very nice sense of accomplishment, given that you got to speak to people like Alice Drummond and people from Ghostbusters 2. That must have been great to be able to share those stories, even though they're not with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the major one that's on screen is Harold Ramis, and that was particularly hard for Anthony to edit when we first heard of his passing, because he was such a nice, down-to-earth guy. You know, we knocked on his door and he's like, hey, it's the Ghostbusters, and totally disarmed us. And it takes a really big person to be able to disarm people and make them feel at home and comfortable. And I think what's nice with the film is that they feel very much with us. So it was really difficult, but it adds that extra sense of responsibility to be able to tell their story properly. And I think for us, the major disappointment with it taking so long as it has, through no fault of our own, is that we really wanted to show these people this film, you know, that we've dedicated to them, and unfortunately that can't be. But I mean, yeah, Alice Drummond, Michael Gross, Terry Windell. I mean, Terry Windell and Richard Edlund, they still to this day is probably one of the funniest interviews I've ever done, you know, and I've done a lot of interviews.
This is the final question then, I guess a silly film question. Now that you've done this, do you have the bug to go and tell more stories like this? There are more movies that you've got an idea of?
Absolutely. Well, obviously we need to finish Too Hot to Handle, remembering Ghostbusters 2, which we're in post-production. The edit's done. We just now, Derek's back in the US doing all of those, you know, basically working his magic digitally. And then we are working on a Masters of the Universe documentary.
Oh, wonderful.
So with a lovely Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey